Hey, what is up, fellow anti-netters, freedom writers, Scotch? I'm sick. I'm freaking sick. So, you can probably tell by my voice I'm a little sick. I just got done talking for the past hour to two freaking phenomenal people. They are people that have just written a fantastic book in the personal development space, but it's really kind of anti-personal development. And I'm gonna kind of not really talk about it too much. You're gonna hear all about it in this upcoming interview that you'll be seeing here very, very shortly. Okay, and it starts out. We talk about these two authors, their background, um, which is in the field of karate, and then how that gravitated into developing this life philosophy framework that is freaking fascinating. So I'm going to show my screen here. Here's the actual book, like the internal pages of the book, and like here's the badass cover. And very, very soon you're going to be able to get the book for pretty darn close to free. All you have to do is pay the shipping and materials cost. They don't make a single penny off this freaking book. It is a phenomenal, phenomenal book on basically upgrading, transforming your life, and getting you out of a state of listlessness and a crappy, just lingering lifestyle into something that is exciting, fulfilling, and in a very congruent way. So I just spent an hour speaking with both of these authors. They're fantastic people, Mr. Ken J. Caputo and Stephanie Ann Roy. And I've decided to share this interview with you. So I'm going to segue right into that right now and get ready. It's a long interview. About halfway through, we get into the core material of the book, and it's just really exciting stuff. Listen to the way Ken talks. He is uh, just such a deep thinker, and his book is fantastic. Stephanie was a huge contributing factor to the book, and this is a power team, a power freaking partnership here that wrote the book, and I'm so freaking honored and grateful to be able to share them with you, share this with you. And below this video, you can get an early bird access link to where you can get your filthy little ink stained anti-net Zettelkasten hands on this frickin' book when it goes live. And all you have to do is pay for the shipping and the materials cost. You'll get an actual physical analog book that you can stick a frickin' bib card in and read and enjoy and hopefully transform your freaking life over this next year. So get ready. It's a fun interview, and I'm going to transition into that right now. Peace and love, my fellow anti-netters. Hope all is well. Talk to you later. Stay crispy. All right, what is up, fellow anti-netters, fellow members of Scott Shepard's crazy eclectic YouTube channel? I've got two amazing, awesome guests with me today on this call. And these two individuals are people that, well, at least Stephanie, she's been a longtime anti-netter. She found me through, I think, my YouTube channel. She has been a subscriber of the Scott Shepherd letter for since the very beginning, and she is now embarking on launching her book with the same kind of foundation and business model that I use, which is called an analog knowledge funnel, meaning analog books, analog newsletters, all of that. And she has been her and her partner in crime and teammate Ken have been putting together a beautiful, freaking fantastic book that is coming out soon called The Spiral. And so in this basically video interview, what I'm going to do is we're going to dive deep on their background, their book. They have an amazing, incredible process for really transforming lives of people in a very, like, I would say, in a good balance of Eastern and Western philosophies, and we're gonna just dive in. So, anyways, with that out of the way, welcome Stephanie, welcome Mr. Ken Caputo, and yeah, glad to have you here. So, yeah, um, let's start. And Stephanie, we were talking a little bit before this. You're like, Ken's gonna probably do a lot of the talking here. Um, but I don't know who's going to answer this one, but let's hear your origin story. Give us your backgrounds, and in entrepreneurship, how you guys met, and then, how this whole concept of your philosophy and the spiral, your like basically life philosophy framework, um, came to be. So whoever wants to start answering that big ass question, let it rip and let's hear it.
Yeah, well, it starts with Ken, so I will let him take the lead first because the story starts there.
Yeah, so I guess it begins back for me in the early 90s, going through that meandering process of figuring out what I wanted to do with my life and college not really going overly well and just going through that process of figuring out understanding that I love to teach and I wanted to make a difference in people's lives and just really struggling with all of the traditional methods that would have brought me there. And at the time, I had actually been taking some martial arts classes. I was always really, I've always been an athlete and I was always fascinated, especially with Eastern philosophy. And it seemed like a great way to integrate moving your body and focusing your mind and finding some balance, especially, as a young guy trying to find my way. So, and what had happened was at that time, like things like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Karate Kid were all coming out. So I just come in early for a class, and there were a bunch of kids in there taking martial arts, and I saw these faces lit up, and they're just moving and shouting and punching and kicking, and I just fell in love with the idea of changing people's lives through that. I mean, I at that point I'd only been training for less than a year, and just said, "How do I do this?" So they brought me in and started teaching me to be an assistant instructor. And a couple years later, there was a struggling school that had lost its instructor, and they asked me to, go out there and take it over, see if I could do something with it. And 3 months later, it was basically my school to run. And over time, I evolved it from this little school into a school with a couple hundred students, teaching out of like 1,000 square feet. And
Hmm.
it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah, and then for our viewers, just to clarify, and you said this, but I want to re-clarify, is this is a karate school that you basically took over and, um, guided from a kind of a dying type of school, and into a thriving, healthy, uh, karate school, basically, right?
Yeah, and I knew nothing about running a business.
Yeah.
So there was quite the learning curve there. And honestly, it wasn't even about being a martial arts teacher. It was really about finding ways to positively impact people's lives multi-generationally. So I
Hmm.
loved the idea that as opposed to like being a traditional school teacher, you didn't have them for 9 months and then they'd go on their way.
Hmm.
You could train someone for decades, all
Hmm.
ages, all backgrounds. And I just fell in love with that whole process. And over time, we really positioned the school as a resource for the community. We became an ally for families, and we really, really delved into learning
Hmm.
and becoming a place where people could not only learn martial arts, but learn how to learn.
Hmm.
And that's how it kind of evolved into all the other projects we've done through the years.
Yep, yep. And yeah, we'll get into that here too, which is kind of really cool of how your whole, life philosophy and this whole this whole framework and all of the knowledge that is, packed into your book, The Spiral, it emanated not from, just some, I don't know, random reading, you know, Tony Robbins and then just cutting a few things out. No, it came from like the organic process of starting, in Eastern, like philosophy and karate and learning and creating your own frameworks and evolving that. And then basically uh building it into your higher order, operation and branch is learning, like you've said, and you've got the momentum learning, whole freaking branch of your business, right? And um it's interesting because and this is what a lot of people have done is if you just start at the top down, you're never going to uh, unearth the elements of really changing people's lives. You've started from the bottom up, of like, let's start with this at this karate school, and from there unearth, you know, basically universal philosophies and practices that will help transform people's life, in whatever field or realm that they're on, that they're in. So yeah, let me ask you this question. When did you start and take over that karate school? What year?
Pretty sure it's 1993.
Wow, amazing. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's been a long time. I mean, and at the time when I took it over, because it was so small, this was one of the other things that really came into, led into all the work we're doing now. It was just me, like teaching 6 days a week and
Hmm.
basically doing the hustle grind entrepreneurial thing and pretty much exhausting myself.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I remember I had made a commitment that I was going to read 50 books a year,
Hmm.
and I've pretty much done that through all that time. But one of the ones that really like started the trajectory that brought Steph into the equation and everything was reading Michael Gerber's E-Myth
Hmm.
and realizing that I didn't own a business, I owned a job.
Yes. Yeah.
And at
Yeah.
first it
Yeah. Yeah.
wasn't even my business. I had other partners and I bought them out over time. And,
Hmm.
by 2000, I owned it outright. But that was that shift where it's like, okay, we need to think about the design and create something where other people can contribute and we can build this. We can build this into something that's not personality driven around just one person.
Yeah.
So that was a huge shift in the probably the mid 90s when that happened.
Yeah. So you went from working in the business to working on the business and being above
Yeah.
outside of the org chart, you know. Yeah. That's a step that so many entrepreneurs well, the the most important aspect in doing that is knowing that concept in and of itself, right? Most people don't really even know, which you had the realization of, that they are in the business and they have just their own job. They've created a job for themselves and not like a business for themselves, right? It's not an asset for
Yeah,
themselves.
it's really
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
It,
And then you end up just finding yourself in this try harder mindset of just working more and more
hmm.
and doing more and more to try to be successful. And it's just it's really not sustainable. And frankly, it's not as rewarding. I mean, my whole idea behind teaching was to teach people to be better than I was
Yep.
at martial arts or at teaching or whatever. So, and if you don't create space and then have structured systems in place that are transferable and translatable,
Hmm.
that can't really happen.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And um today, like, you're not even running the day to day of the karate school. Is that right? You're Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
Actually, the our director right now, John, he started training with me when he was 5.
Oh my God.
He was
Yeah.
this
See.
just, and now he's married and has his, and he runs the school and he's amazing. He's a 4th degree black belt. He's been training as long as Steph actually.
Hmm.
And yeah, and it's been passed down like that. So we've had multiple people who've taken on the leadership role. We just focused on creating strong systems and pipelines so that made it easier for them to take on those roles and succeed. And it's freed us up to do other things.
Yep. Yep. Amazing. And yeah, so tell me how your uh partner in crime, Stephanie, came into play in this whole journey. And Stephanie, did you just enter it and meet Ken when he was running his karate school, or yeah, how did
Yeah.
that come into play?
Pretty much. Yeah. So well, to go all the way back, I did dance from the time that I was 3 to 11, and then I got bored with it and wanted to do something else. And I saw my cousin doing karate one time at my grandma's house. So I was like, that sounds cool. So I started training with Ken at 12 years old
Hmm.
and just
Amazing.
basically never left. So that was in 1998 was when I started training. And I became an instructor and then the ended up taking over kind of as chief instructor, as the lead instructor, and then have slowly, grown into the partnership role over the last 25 years. But I, unlike Ken, was not an athlete, never really have been. So the reason that I fell in love with it was because the focus was on that personal growth and development, and also the energy. I mean, when most people think of martial artists, they think of, people punching each other in the head, or MMA or UFC or that kind of thing. And the style, we always refer to it as karate school. I think partially because the old dojo had these big red karate letters in the 90s over it, because that's like what was cool at the time.
Hmm.
But the style that we train, just because someone always inevitably asks, is a hybrid style. So it's Shaolin Kempo karate.
Hmm.
So the root of it is actually more in the Shaolin, which is a Chinese art as opposed to a Japanese art. And that's a lot of the influence that comes into the book is more from that softer art. So the Shaolin art is a lot softer. If if you've seen the movie Kung Fu Panda, that's the style of martial arts that our art is rooted in. So we train tiger, leopard, snake, dragon, and crane. That's a core part of the system that we train. And what's really cool with what Ken did with it over the years, in conjunction with um, his mentor, who also became a very influential mentor in my life, is take these principles of, these philosophies, these movement practices, and then turn them into things that can be used in your day-to-day life. So the martial arts was a metaphor for how to be a better person. It wasn't just about punching and kicking. So, like, one of the programs that we go into corporations and businesses now and teach with teams is a 5 animal leadership model that comes from that Shaolin art, and it just helps people understand communication and leadership styles in a way where you just kind of opening your awareness. And that's a lot of what the book is too, is it's creating a perspective that opens your awareness in a different way so that you can have a better understanding of yourself and a better understanding of others and the dynamic between them.
Yep.
So, and
Yep.
that was the part I love. The karate's fun, like the movement is fun, but for me it was always that meta piece, that how
Yep.
to be a better person, that drew me in for so long.
Yep, yep, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, let's start transitioning into talking about now the where you've transitioned into. Um and also for the viewers and listeners, you guys are based out of based in Connecticut. So you've been able to transform your community through, you know, through, the vehicle, just like, you what I teach in, my the Scott Shepherd letter and Right to Freedom. There's always that mechanism or the vehicle, like the Antinet Zettelkasten, for instance, is like my own vehicle. And it's my vehicle to get to a greater good, a greater higher level movement of like transforming your mind and then creating really deep um creative output, like writing and work and all of that, And so what you're saying is karate is your vehicle to teach personal development, transformation, becoming a better person, becoming more disciplined, sticking to your agreements in life and just being a all around better person instead of, what I call shit weasels, the derogatory shit weasels. I've got like two meanings of shit weasels. One is like my good shit weasels, and the other one is like, the other types of lazy TikTok, addicted shit weasels. So anyway, um, let's get into and transition into when did you make the change, the switch and change, or maybe it's still gradual of, what, I don't want to be uh you know operating a karate school, um you know from 9 to 5 all my life. We're going to transition into other stuff like coaching and your whole momentum learning systems and all of that. Like, when did that happen in this, like, maybe it's all that's always going to be happening, but when did you decide to make that switch of, what, we're going to sunset, not sunset, but let the karate school run on its own and shift into the whole momentum um project and operation?
Well, I could preface it. So it started, gosh, probably like 15 years ago, maybe. So we had, because Ken is such an innovator and he was always learning and borrowing brilliance from other industries, we started to create all of these duplicatable systems just to help maintain quality in our own martial arts schools. So, and again, a lot of martial artists, there's a lot of ego. They don't make space for the people coming up underneath them. Ken always had the opposite view of training. He told us from the very beginning he wanted to train us to be better than him. We're still chasing him all these years later, but literally he runs Spartans competitively and is like climbing mountains and stuff. So someday maybe one of us will catch up. But so we developed all of these programs with the idea of scale and duplicatability in mind for the martial arts school. And then that created the kind of the first version of a consulting business that was more tailored to the martial arts specifically. And then that whole ego part, martial artists do for the most part, they have their kind of way of doing it. They can be a little set in the style that they train. And so it's a very small industry to try to work with. And we really felt that we had something we could offer that went beyond just punching and kicking, because there's a lot of good that we could do. There's a lot of different ways to learn, a lot of ways you can fall in love with learning. The martial arts is just one of them. So it was through some exploration into expanding into products and services, like our programs to sell to other martial arts schools, which kind of led down a very winding path to opening a 16,000 square foot family education, empowerment, and entertainment
That's
center
right.
called Questers Way,
Yep.
which is where, I mean, the martial arts school, we learned a lot about business, but it's a smaller scale thing. So when we went to this larger model, we got a crash course in hiring. And then Ken, do you want to kind of explain a little bit more about that? Which we do. We talk about that. That's part of what we share in the
It's
book,
in the
just
book.
kind of our
Yeah.
story. Yeah. So Ken, do you want to share briefly just about the center and some of the fun lessons we learned?
Yeah, and I guess, you know, I was always obsessed with what happens when people are in an environment to truly contribute their unique work. And everyone from Steph, all of these people that were the most unlikely martial arts instructors you would ever meet, who just blossomed into incredible humans and then did such amazing things. And really, we just felt that it was just too limiting. I personally, I want to positively impact as many lives as possible within my lifetime and beyond. And that has nothing to do with me. That has to do with empowering other people so that those ripples go out and spread. So the idea behind Questers Way was, in the background, we kept focusing. We donated thousands of hours to local school systems, and we're really digging deep into this idea of learning. And that's where this whole process, it's just a natural learning method. We call it momentum learning because the idea is the more that you learn something, the easier it should get, not harder. The hardest thing is when it's new, and now, yes, it takes more effort, but once you get it, you get it. So design it that way. So we started teaching it to teachers. We started teaching it to people who had technical skills, but maybe didn't know how to teach. And that led to us recognizing this in this small town we were in. There was a big box store that had gone out. They had this giant space sitting there doing nothing. And they were looking for something that would bring the community in. So we decided to open Questers Way, with the idea being that we hire people who have interesting technical skills, from breakdancing to Dungeons and Dragons to painting, and then we teach them how to teach it. And so we opened this center, and you had all of these classes, and people could come in and they could choose a course of study, almost like a Montessori school, and find things that were interesting, and they could trust the way they were going to learn, and the way they were going to be taught was going to be consistent. All that would change would be the information. And then, because we were focused on meaningful human connection, we built a full healthy eating restaurant into it. We had never run a commercial restaurant. That was a learning curve.
Yeah.
That was like, oh my goodness. And it had a giant indoor park that we would staff with educators so kids could play in an unstructured way, but do it safely. So yeah, so that was this center, and we ran that for 4 years, until right up until the pandemic
COVID.
hit.
Yep. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So that's fascinating. And that's, because your whole momentum learning system and your frameworks around teaching and learning, you kind of used Questers as a way to instantiate that, right? And kind of put that into practice yourselves, And which is, it's kind of cool because like now here you are, and now after the pandemic, it's probably you learned a lot of, you know, good lessons, hard lessons, I'm sure, from opening Quester's Way, and then, you know, and then now you have this battle tested whole framework for teaching and learning that you can be a little bit more agile and, you know, run a you know, like a remote business, let's just call it. So that's, yeah, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize that the momentum learning system whole framework underpinned that whole Quester's way and all of that. So yeah, that's fascinating. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we always felt like you need a core to build out from, just like what you do, you know.
Hmm.
And what we would look, if you look at like a community center, different people come in under one roof and offer services, but the only thing that connects them is the space. So we wanted to make the methodology, our belief system, our core values, that was at the center. And then we just hired people that aligned with that. So there was a level of integration and consistency that you experienced that made it just amazing.
Hmm.
And we've always felt like a business, really a good business to us. It's an asset to the community, and it's an ecosystem. So all the pieces have to work together: the community, the staff, and the teachings, the
Hmm.
things that, you know, the services that you share through it. So,
Hmm.
and we had done it for years with the dojo. That was like the petri dish
Yeah,
where
yeah,
we
yeah.
tested all these things in a more controlled environment. Then we just opened the floodgates and then just managed the chaos
Yep,
from
yep,
there.
yep. Amazing.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
that was the other piece of it that got battle tested during that was just that you know, what you typically think of as work life balance, or just any semblance of balance. It was a crazy time with a startup on that scale. But then also, we like to think of it more of integration, you know. So we ended up in a place where we were very out of balance in our own lives, and that's kind of what we, you know, bring into the book as well, is just this idea of finding the integration, finding the balance, you know, within yourself, within your own life, within people, you know, between different people. So it's just looking, that was the other piece. We got to test, you know, kind of the nuts and bolts of the system we'd created, but then also battle test all of those, just how to be a good person, how to live a good life skills. And it was, yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience. And we had our mentor, you know, came in partway through and had a huge influence on our ability to move through that time with some semblance of grace and balance, and then influenced what's come on the other side of it as well.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. So uh, let's jump into the book now. And before we do, I'm gonna orient our audience. Okay, so karate school, and then gravitated into, basically through doing that, you've developed your own kind of learning system called Momentum Learning Systems, and that framework. And what that is, so that's Momentum Learning Systems, for a framework for effectively teaching people and, you know, educating people. And that whole system, you help other, you know, course creators and people design curriculums and their teaching style to get amazing results out of their students. And then you're like, okay, we have this amazing freaking framework. Let's put it into practice and create this amazing, crazy community center called Quester's Way, you know, which is part 3 in Connecticut, you know, which you ran for 4 years. You even opened a restaurant in there in 16,000 square feet, and, you know, just craziness, chaos. And that was amazing. The pandemic ended that. And then here you are today, the fourth pillar, let's just call it, where you're like, okay, um, what we're going to do and teach is kind of around life philosophy and personal development, and how to create a life that is basically momentum gaining, self-sustaining, without burnout, without like the, you know, crazy toxic self-help bullshit, like, you know, you're a problem and you need to fix it, and you know, um and that is the fourth pillar, which you're, you know, basically gravitating into, and with this launch of your book, The Spiral. However, it's probably all going to feed into, the umbrella brand that we've talked about is momentum, like momentum learning and all that. So it's all going to kind of like, you know, probably with a framework that's probably talked about in your book, it's all going to be cohesive. So talk about that transition, talk about the spiral and how you decided to write instead of writing a book about momentum learning systems, why did you decide to write a book about the whole concept of, creating the life spiral, spiraling up, and write a book called The Spiral? Let's hear that.
Yeah, I'm like always. I'm gonna let Ken do most of it, but I did have one thought I wanted to throw in first because as you were explaining that in terms of pillars, it just kind of it's not really a fourth pillar. It's we're moving up a spiral. We've kind of
Mm,
come back around to what made our martial arts schools successful in a very small town, and just that focus on personal growth and development and being your best self, doing your best work, living your best life. It's just this expanding spiral up where now we've found a way, so the dojo is very limited local business, and then Quester's Way started to expand that out a little bit, and now this is the opportunity to bring it even farther than we can with a brick and mortar business. So instead of pillars, it's a spiral, because somehow everything we come back to is circles and spirals. So Ken, do you want to talk a little bit more about the model and the origin of it?
Yeah, and so one of the things that we recognized so you're working with all of these amazing humans at all different stages of their life, and we started noticing for all of us, the first step is kind of this cultivation. It's filling yourself up so you can feel good about yourself in some way. And so we would create opportunities for people to do that. And what would happen is, I'd call it spilling over. It's like literally it's like when you see the movie that just really touched you in some way, and it's you're filled to the bursting with the experience of the movie. So what do you want to do then? You want to share that. You want that to go out into the world around you. You want to give away that excess. And entrepreneurially, having experienced the depletion when you're giving away of yourself, when you don't have excess, and that downward spiral, it's like, how can we focus first on living a life that we can feel good about, and understanding that life isn't actually an upward spiral, it's dynamic, and there are definitely, as our mentor would say, weather systems that would come and go.
hmm
So the things that kind of press you down, but if you've put in practice a methodology and a perspective that allows you to prepare in advance for those difficult times, you're more resilient. And then those people would become attracted, especially if they're entrepreneurial. They'd see a problem worth solving to some cause, some greater good. And they're very, very rarely satisfied with the current solutions being offered. So they start innovating. They start figuring out how to get out there and contribute. But at its core, they need to remember to be true to themselves. So, and that's our whole idea of being an integrated entrepreneur. So the life spiral is like that first step. It's looking at what our mentor believed were the three most important circles of impact in the way that you move through your life: the relationships you have with yourself and others, your levels of vitality, and the value you contribute to things that are greater than yourself. And the more those intersect, the more fulfilled you are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, but then as we started sharing this, what would happen is people would like hit the reset button like New Year's Eve, and it's like, all right, I need to be in the gym 3 hours a day. And they went into that do too much.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
In one
And
of the circles, like, I
yeah,
was going to ask
yeah.
this. The vitality circle is the one related to like health, sleep,
Yep.
fitness, all of that. So you're saying they would go like way too extreme in one of the circles, the vitality circle, and end up, basically, um, just not paying attention to any of the other really important aspects, those other two circles, in their life, right?
Yeah. And we only have so much energy, and
hmm
we notice there's a great book. I don't remember when it was written, probably the mid 2000s, called Willpower. Well, there's Willpower Doesn't Work, by Benjamin Hardy. But
Okay.
before that, there was one called Willpower.
Yeah.
And they talked about the more you have to maintain, you have to assert control over your behavior, you deplete that.
Mm-hmm.
So, in working with children, look at a kid after they've been sitting in school for 8 hours, they're
Oh yeah.
whacked.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up redesigning the whole way that we taught our classes around the idea that we can't force them to do this. They don't have that level of discipline. It's not fair to them. We need a better design.
Mm-hmm.
So people do the same thing in their life. If they're massively investing in vitality, they don't have the energy. And so their relationships start to suffer a little bit, or their work starts to suffer. So, so the model that we created was around the idea of we all have energy efficient patterns that we rely on to kind of conserve energy, but those patterns can also get us stuck. So how can we look at this from the perspective of what are little changes, almost like atomic habits,
Mm-hmm.
like the James Clear type thing? What are the little ways that we can gently, incrementally make adjustments in each of these circles in a rhythm, so that over time you create this feeling of spiraling up and you're just breaking those circles, but you're not doing it in a try harder methodology. You're working smarter instead of harder, basically.
Yeah. 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 Fascinating. Yeah. It's funny. I was going to ask you that. That's, I think, a core part of your book, the three circles: vitality, relationships, and values. I saw
Yep.
that in the book, and my first question was like, "What's vitality?" And then it kind of answered it for myself later on when I kept reading it. And but tell me about the values component. What is that part of the circle, and what does that entail?
So the expression is drop a pebble and it makes ripples, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you think, we each have some contribution, and I just love the metaphor of you're holding it in your hand. There's something that you have that can add value, but you have to be willing to let it go. You have to release it out into the world, just like writing a book. This now in the world we live in, this YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
is an example of that. So, but then there's also going to be a point of impact. So you have to release it so that there's the point of impact, and then you trust that from that ripples will naturally spread.
Mm-hmm.
So the value is that. And we think a lot in terms of like the work that you do, but value is being a good parent, being a good child, being a good partner, whatever it is. It's how is the unique contributions that you make as a human expanding out into the world around you, and is that intentional? Is it something that you're aware of, or is it just sort of happening by accident? And our idea is, let's take control of that. Let's at least create a healthy perspective around it, so that we're making decisions, they're amplifying our value to the benefit of ourselves and those around us. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what that circle's about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about making impact, and then through that, creating proper momentum through other people to make impact. Yeah.
Yeah. And what adds meaning to life? Purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if you're thinking in terms of that, it just makes it energizes each of the circles, energizes the other one. So when you start a new job and you feel fulfilled, or a new business, all of a sudden it enriches your relationships. You treat yourself better,
Mm-hmm.
and it elevates your vitality. So focusing in any one of these circles, just kind of by nature of it, elevates the others.
Yeah. And let's imagine like a certain person watching or listening to this interview right now, and let's say maybe they're in a spot where we've probably all been, myself included, where they're maybe in an underwhelming place in their life. They've hit they've hit just a phase where there's not that much hope. They're just getting through their day-to-day life. um Maybe they've tried some things in the past, like reading like the books like Mindset, or like Tony Robbins and stuff like that, and it's worked, but it's maybe faded. And um maybe they find themselves in a place, where, yeah, they're working at like a 9 to 5 job that's just not fulfilling, or you know they've they're they've gotten to this place where they're looking up, they're like 40 years old, and they're like, all right, I've like an unfulfilled relationship, I've got kids, I've just been a workaholic, or I've been drinking too much alcohol, whatever, and they're just in this crappy place, and they need to get that reignite into, I would call it spiraling up and gaining some momentum. What would you tell them or teach them, or how would this book affect them and help them?
Want me to go,
Yep.
Steph?
So yeah, well, yeah, I think part of it, the book is, and we talk about this in there too. It gives a lot of perspective, and I think that's one of the first things is just recognizing that you're not alone when you're going through all those things. Like you said, you've ended up there. We've all ended up there. Even to the best of us end up in those kind of situations. Actually, someone else in the group that the Scott Shepherd group and the Right to Freedom group is talking about working with very wealthy people who are unfulfilled, just because we all go through these seasons. So recognizing that your now isn't a life sentence, and starting to gain a little bit of perspective on that, it's kind of that first step. And then it's all about how making little changes can start to create those big differences. So Ken, you can go from there.
Yeah, and the spiral part of it, the idea is how can you expand your perspective so that it becomes broader, wider, all encompassing relative to the problems. So if the problems are consuming all of your attention, it's really, really hard to contextualize them in a way where you can see a way out. I can remember in the military, one of the things we used to say is you can't stop the clock,
Hmm.
because as miserable as the moment might be, eventually if the time was enough, there was a time where you weren't in that situation, and hopefully there'll be a time where you won't be again. So you just have to expand the perspective. So and our model has always been based on this idea of keep asking bigger and better questions until the questions disappear and the answer reveals itself.
Hmm.
Then you can ask another question on top of it. But the idea is, I think a lot of times what I found through absorbing a ton of the self-help stuff was you were looking for the answers first
Hmm.
instead of learning how to ask good questions.
Hmm.
So you're asking yourself questions. What you're just getting curious. It's like, what is up with my relationships right now? Why do I keep ending up here?
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you start to recognize those patterns not as something bad, not as something that defeats you. It's something that informs you. When if you don't feel well and you don't know what's wrong, it's really hard to do anything about it.
Hmm.
But when you get a diagnosis, even if it's a scary one, at least now you can start to figure out what you're going to do from there. So that's the idea behind, and that's what we say to people is let's start figuring out what questions you can ask, and let's expand your perspective. Let's broaden the way that you're looking at your life until we can capture something outside of the challenges you're currently facing.
Hmm.
And we lived that. We talk about that in the book too. It's the other expression that pops into mind is make as many mistakes as you can as fast as you can until you reach your inner genius.
Hmm.
So we just went ahead and made all the mistakes.
Yeah.
and we all do that at times in our lives. And how much do you learn from that? How much better off are you, even though it's kind of miserable in the process? The experiential wisdom on the other side of that is incredibly powerful, not only for you, but for the people that your life will intersect with moving forwards.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have some example questions, some big questions? And I know you have journaling prompts as well that people can start by asking themselves to get in touch with reality. That's kind of the thing that popped into my mind too is for people to kind of get in touch with reality a little bit too of their situation. And um also um I liked what you said, Stephanie, about and I noticed this in the book. It's in the very, very beginning about all about perspective, right? And then with that, the idea of just making small incremental changes and having faith that things will get better. So I remember, and I'm bringing this up too. It's because I was listening to a podcast once of this one individual who is a successful entrepreneur in San Diego. I was living in San Diego at the time. I was listening to a podcast of him, and for me, it was a time when I had previously left a company that I had co-founded. I had like 100 employees under me. I was the CMO. and co-founder, and I was just burnt out to a crisp, and I just went on this whole sabbatical for a year. And during that time, I was like, kind of just lonely. Uh, it was okay. Life was okay. It wasn't horrible, but I'm like, you know what? Yeah, it just isn't the best. And I'm like wondering when I'm gonna get back into a state of like, I would say momentum and feeling really excited about life. And I remember listening to this guy's podcast, and he said he, and I thought he had everything all figured out. And he's like, hey, a year ago, a year and a half ago, he's like, I was just down in the dumps, worst place I've ever been in my life. And trust me, just trust yourself. It will get better. And I that really helped give me hope, pull me through. And for me personally, where I am today, it's like I'm in an amazing relationship. I've got a little baby kid on the way, and it's just things are freaking amazing, right? And it's because I had a message that I think you guys are bringing in your book, which is having hope, gain perspective, and then just don't stress yourself out by doing these massive change, but spiral up essentially, slowly but surely. So with that in mind, like, what is like one key thing, piece of advice or question that they can ask themselves or that they can do to, just make a small step towards, getting into a life of momentum and fulfillment.
I think part of it is just paying attention to what makes you feel good and is also simultaneously beneficial and healthy at the same time. Because
Yeah.
eating a whole chocolate cake, it may make you feel good for a little bit, but in the end, you're not gonna feel great on the other side. But I think there's the other piece to this is taking an active role. So there's trusting that things are going to work out,
Hmm.
but if you just sit there and hope that it's going to change, it's not going to happen. You do have to. There's some internal work that needs to be done to be able to make that progress forwards. And if you get stuck in that victim mindset of just waiting for someone else and coming to fix it, whether it's another person or the government or some greater higher being, that's out there just hoping God's going to come fix all your problems eventually, and the reason for all your suffering is going to reveal itself. You might get stuck there longer than. So it's how can you become a student of yourself and start to figure out what helps you move forward. So when you're feeling so run down that you can't get yourself out of bed, maybe start to practice and play with some different things. And you're going to have one person shouting on the internet that it's all about making your bed in the morning, and somebody else is going to tell you to get up at 4 a.m. and that's going to make you feel better, and someone else is going to say time restricted fasting or intermittent, whatever it is. But like I know someone who time restricted fasting makes them puke. They can't, like, their body, their blood sugar does not regulate. They can't do that. So all of the gurus out there saying that that's the answer, it's the answer for them. I've heard of bodybuilders that are on a plant-based diet and it works great for them. So I think the important thing is learning who you are. So it's kind of stepping back and asking, who am I? But not just in this existential crisis sort of way, but what makes me feel good when I eat this? Does it give me more energy, or do I get, drained 2 hours later? Or, when I'm with this person, does it lift me up and make me feel better? Or when I leave that situation, do I feel down about myself? There was a relationship that I was in for a time where it should have been someone that was lifting me up, but I constantly felt cut down,
Hmm.
and as soon as I recognized that, it was like, whoop, we need to change the dynamic here because this
Yep.
is not working. So I think it's just become a student of yourself. Like you've said a million times before, the only right answer is a test, so you got to make those little incremental changes and then pay attention to how it makes you feel. So Ken, I don't know if you have anything different or.
Well, I think just the thing that adds to that, it's it's asking yourself the question, how can I how can I design things in a way that makes it easier for me to make choices that move me in the direction that I want to be moving. And a lot of times it's that it's not pushing through resistance. It's as best you can lowering resistance. And my favorite story was a vitality story with one of our longtime friends and clients who just he was drinking too much soda and he wanted to increase the amount of water he was drinking. And, this is coming from his doctor and just he needed less sugar. And that was just an easy way to remove some of it. So what he ended up doing was putting a pitcher of water in front of the soda in his refrigerator. So now every time he had to reach around the water to grab the soda. So he didn't try to make himself stop drinking soda. It was still there, but he made the choice, one that was conscious. And instantly he was drinking 50% more water and 50% less soda. So, so part of it is asking those questions, what makes me move towards someone in a relationship? What makes me move away from them? And how can I design so that I feel good about moving towards this person, knowing that everybody has things that are going to repel us because we're not clones of each other,
Yep.
So that's just the reality of it, and it's the same thing with value. What would I do for free? What energizes me about the idea of going and doing the work that I do, and what's depleting me? And is there a way that I can design my life to slowly bring more of the ads in and remove some of those minuses, replace them, so that overall you're creating like a net positive effect.
Yeah. Fantastic. And it's interesting to hear is on that example that you've just shared is a lot of people are like, oh, wait, you're thinking that, oh, you have to like drink 100% water and solve the problem. But I liked how you illustrated even just 50% more, like 50% more, small, just a small environmental, availability change in the physical environment has almost been a hack to hack around willpower, where you don't have to use willpower. It's just there, and it makes it easy to drink water, and you don't have to shift to 100% drinking water right away. It's cool that, oh, it was a 50% increase, which is huge. So that's something that's interesting from what you've just shared as well.
Yeah,
When we
some
do
is
the
better than
like
none.
our
Some is better than none. So if you're moving, like Ken said, in a net positive direction, that can be helpful. And it's also worth saying that sometimes you do need to just cut something out, like depending on who you are, especially if we're talking about like alcohol for some people, or if there's a health issue. Sometimes you do just need to nix something, but it's looking at what your goals are, what each of those three circles mean to you, and what's going to help you move in the direction you want to in your life, and then making choices based on that. So rather than just trying to just like knuckle down and grin and bear it, it's thinking through what is going to move me in the direction I want to go, and then how can I incrementally start to move there. And if you do have to make an extreme change, how can you set up your environment to help support that? How can you balance that out, and maybe even add in a little bit of extra self-care if you're having to cut out something like that? And then Ken, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say that if you think about having an expanding amount of choices, that takes a lot of the pressure off. So like our 5 animal leadership program, it's literally 5 ways to win. So when you're looking at a problem or leveraging an opportunity, if you have 5 paths that will all get you to a positive outcome, now it's just fun experimenting with them. It's not binary anymore. It's not either this works or it doesn't. It's more about what will be the interesting way to get this to work for now, knowing that if things change, that's okay too. So maybe our friend, over time, he's like, hey, you know what, you really do have to give up soda. It's just the best thing for you. But he's halfway there now. So it's an easier thing. So yeah, and that's the idea. And the other part too, I think is, one of my other, we have all these little sayings that help create these little anchors and triggers, but the journey is the home. All of your life is your life, and the difficult times are as much your life and your experience as the times that are less difficult. So we might as well be conscious and present as best we can,
Hmm.
and sometimes it's not always fun, but that's okay. That adds context and depth and richness to the experience of living our life.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
fascinating. And what do you think? What do you think makes your book uh more distinct than any other book on the planet? What is the most unique, unconventional, anti-conventional, uh, aspect of your book that separates it from everything else out there? Like, for instance, like, it's rooted in Chinese philosophy, a bit as well, it sounds like. But what do you think? There's so many freaking self-help, personal development books out there. How does the spiral, you know, shine differently and is distinct from every other one in that category?
That's a good question, and I think the answer is it is and it isn't, just by nature of it being our work. So, like, we talk a lot about, part of what we do is we design environments where the right teachers and the right students can find each other.
Mhm,
So, and if they don't resonate, there's nothing wrong with the teacher, there's nothing wrong with the student. It's the dynamic that's created. So when for the right people, the idea of the life spiral is something that's going to resonate with them. Having us talk to them about it and sharing our stories will resonate with them. Others may find it annoying. It doesn't work for them. So,
mhm,
so I think at its core, it's kind of funny. It's they're all saying the same thing.
mhm,
It's just and we found this with teachers. What kids loved was the human, and they almost didn't even care whether they were teaching them how to play chess or how to do creative writing or punch and kick. That didn't matter. They just resonated with that person, and
mhm,
that's what mattered most, right?
mhm,
So I think that really, now, one thing that does make it unique, though, is this whole idea of these three circles that came through our mentor. It's something that, I mean, decades of study and traveling the world and integrating, Taoist and Buddhist and shamanistic, and he's in South America, all of these different cultures, looking at what helps people just be good humans. And then he distilled it down into this methodology that we then took and put into kind of a practical format, because he was really like just mad genius type person.
mhm,
Incredible human. He's no longer with us, sadly. But yeah, so that, the perspective and the process we're sharing is something that has some very unique roots, but then again, it all comes from wisdom traditions. He just wove them together in a slightly different way.
mhm,
Yeah, so I'll give my what I think is as a more concrete answer is probably just the perspective of balance and integration, which Ken just kind of demonstrated in the way that he gave his answer. But the way that I've watched people respond to the programs that we do through martial arts, through doing this whole life spiral concept in corporate settings and in community settings, is just the fact that we make it. It's okay to be you, and it's okay to be human, and it's okay if you're not always spiraling up. So a lot of times, the gurus out there, the loud people on the internet are just shouting, if you were more like me, you'd be okay.
mhm,
And that doesn't work. We're all unique human beings. So I think we're inviting people to connect with who they are in a balanced and integrated way with the people around them that are important. So it just and that's what, as I've listened to feedback from different groups and individuals that we've worked with, it's just we help amplify their signal, help them recognize their own unique contributions, and also become okay with their own humanity and imperfections and flaws. So I think it's just this balanced approach that doesn't get seen as much. And I some of it may be because people are trying to be controversial. So of course the guy who's talking about, what like the carnivore diet, only eat meat, like that's going to get a lot of attention because it's so different and unique. But there's it's only going to work for a certain group of people. There has to be there has to be this balance and it has to work for you. So I think that's a unique message that a lot of other I have heard of people who are super turned off by the idea of self-help because it's just someone with a perfect life telling them that if you were more like me, you'd be okay. And that doesn't make you feel good. So you want to, you want to learn from other humans and you want to know it's okay to be human.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Great,
vote for
great,
Steph's
great
answer.
point.
I like that answer better.
You know what? I liked both of them because I think there was a lot of honesty and truth in what you said too, Ken. Is and I've talked about this before, is truth, and this is what kind of studying Nicholas Luhmann, the creator of the Zettelkasten, taught me. Um, there's truth in paradox. So if you got two opposing views, and kind of what you've stated is like it is distinct from everything else, and it isn't at the same time because it depends on the person's
Yeah.
perspective and who's your dream reader, who's your dream audience member. Because what you've created is designed to basically attract a certain type of person and repel a different type of person. You know, if for instance, if there's like those, you know, freaking 18-year-old life coaches that, profess themselves as an expert on Facebook ads because they've taken a Tai Lopez course and they want, some hardcore self-development. Well, probably go get hooked on Andrew Tate or, in that realm, or, you know, buy a Gary Vaynerchuk book and think you have to like work, 72 hours in a day and wake up at 4 a.m. and slap yourself in the face and take cold showers and all of that. It's not for that person. Your book is for your certain dream reader, your dream, you know, client, your dream person. So tell me what are the defining characteristics? Like who do you think that this book is made for, and that this book will really change the life of, who is this person that you think would really have their life potentially changed and transformed um, by this book? Can you describe your dream reader?
So I think, for us, it's usually people that are they're interested in self-awareness, um, self-advocacy. They want to take responsibility for, bettering their life. And most importantly, they're focused on something that's greater than themselves. And we've always found that's what we resonate with most. And I think it's why we end up working with a lot of entrepreneurs who, they worked in an environment, realized that they weren't making the impact that they wanted to make. So they stepped out of that. They took that terrifying step into taking control of their own destiny. And now they're trying to figure that out. So I think that people that, they have that kind of value system. It's like, this is up to me
Hmm.
to live the life that I would choose to live. And they're willing to be a little proactive about it. And they're also not attracted to that idea of hustle and grind and just being in battle with your life. I mean, we're like sort of swimming with the current in the way we're doing this. And we're not, just gonna, suck it up and drive on, which was early in my career. It was kind of like that. So I think it's more people like that. They like the idea of checking in with themselves on a regular basis and then looking for ways to have the patience and the interest in just enjoying the journey as they're going through it, and also creating an overall upward trend in the way they experience their life, and then passing that on, sharing that feeling of abundance and value out into the world around them, however big or small that may be.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. Um, Stephanie, anything to add?
Yeah, I think another type of person that might enjoy this book, this perspective and philosophy, are kind of the jaded high performers, or the people that are, have been let down by self-help books in the past and where they've ended up feeling worse instead of better. I think it provides a balanced perspective for people that want to move in a positive direction, but nothing's really worked yet. Because again, it is coming from a more balanced perspective that I think will speak to someone who's they've done the try harder approach and now they're ready to stop pushing the rope and just kind of relax into figuring out how to truly be their best selves, and get to know themselves in a way that's going to move them in a positive direction.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll say that's Steph just demonstrated something that also is unique. We each have a role and the way that we work together. So I'll speak a little bit more in concepts and a little bit more in the vision part, which sometimes can leave people's brains a little fuzzy
Mhm.
and unclear. And then Steph is the implementer, the integrator. So she'll bring, and you'll hear it like in the book, we each
Yep.
write in our own voices so that there's this sense of kind of getting the perspective, but then Steph's make sure that you leave you've got something tangible, actionable. And, without her bringing that skill set, we never would have been able to create anything scalable. It would have been a bunch of great ideas, sit around talking about it, but nothing would move.
Mhm.
So yeah, so we work really well together and really respect each other's, skill sets that we bring together into one partnership.
Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that. You have the parentheses and around it says like Ken's voice or Stephanie's voice, for each section as you're writing it. I love it. And what's cool too is like the beginnings of your chapters, stories are hard, as you guys probably know, to write and recollect and create, and you've got some amazing stories of tying all this stuff together. So it's not just yet another Venn diagram of three circles. No. And what's cool is with your framework, it's you integrate math into it and show the logical aspect of it compounding all three circles. And yeah, I have not seen that before. That's a really fascinating aspect as well. um so yeah, I can't freaking wait. I think your book is going to really transform lives. You're going to get a lot of people that are going to buy your book. It's going to be quiet for a little bit, and then they're going to contact you, reach out, and especially even like later, it could be years later on of reaching out to you and being like, "Hey, I have your book on my shelf. I read it. It really got me through a hard time. It changed my life." And so you're going to see a lot of this activity start to create some momentum around this piece of knowledge asset that you guys have created. So I'm so excited to help you launch it and get it out the door. um and yeah, so I'm probably gonna cut myself off from talking. This probably people can tell I'm recovering. I'm trying to fight through a cold sickness that might have screwed that whole plan up. My voice is starting to crack, so I'm gonna shut up. But I want to invite you to share any one final thought or last words with our um listeners, our viewers, and anything else you want to share. Feel free to.
Yeah, well, I'll do the nuts and bolts part because that's what I do. But I just going off of, so the book is a lot of perspective, but then we're going to be using your model. So as we go into more of the newsletter format, that's when we're going to get to dive into the practices, because that is the other half of it. So you can't just, like Ken said, you can't just live, in the conceptual world all the time, because then you feel good, but then nothing changes, right? That's like when you go to, there's Tony Robbins has changed a lot of lives. I know also there's a lot of rah rah, and then you leave and you're back home and now you're trying to figure out what to do with it. So the book offers the perspective, and then on the other side of it, we're here to help support with the practices, which we also have a model that goes along with that too, that we'll be sharing in future stuff, that'll give you more ideas of how to keep bringing this into your life. Because if it's just a great book that makes you feel good and gives you a new idea that doesn't actually do anything, there's what helps you spiral up is transformation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Is I think that people are gonna this, especially your analog monthly newsletter that you're gonna be giving away as a as part of this book, this whole process is really, I think, going to really help people out a ton to, like you just said, like they go to a Tony Robbins event, they walk on fire, for a second, they leave and they forget about it. Imagine getting a piece of knowledge that helps you kind of realign you, recenter you once a month, delivered to your doorstep that you're talking about, that you can help transform people's lives, is going to be a game changer, I think, for a lot of people. And then you also have an amazing community in the works, as well. I think this is going to be freaking awesome for people. Hold up your book. I want everyone to see it. I'm going to use this as probably the thumbnail here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. It looks beautiful. Well done on the book. And yeah, it'll be launching here soon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link below this video, and people can sign up to the early bird list. And, if they're late to the party, they can get a link to purchase the book. We'll see. And yeah, I'm so excited for both of you. So yeah. All right. Well, with that said, I'm going to hit the stop recording button, and peace and love, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and check out the resources below and get the frickin' spiral. It's not called literally the frickin' spiral. It's called the spiral, but it is going to, I can't wait to read it myself. Like I've been reading it digitally, which is hard for me to do, but I can't wait. I'm going to order it myself, read it in the mornings. And, you know what? I'm so excited to help you get the message into the world. All right. Peace and love, everyone, and stay crispy.